Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man 81 times in the Gospels. 81. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, every one of them record him using it. And nobody else calls him that. Not his disciples, not the Pharisees, not the crowds. Only Jesus. And you know what's strange? He almost never calls himself the Messiah. The word Christos shows up 7 times in the Gospel of Mark. And almost none of them come from Jesus' own mouth. When Peter calls him the Christ in Mark chapter 8, Jesus tells him to be quiet. When the demons shout out his identity, he silences them. When the crowds try to make him king, he just disappears. He avoids Messiah and he reaches for Son of Man over and over, right to his enemies' faces. Now, a lot of folks were taught that this was a humble title. Like Jesus has said, I'm just a human, Son of Man, Son of Adam, just a regular guy. But that's not how the Jewish readers heard it. Not even close. And if we're going to understand what Jesus was really saying and why it got him killed, then we need to look at a passage that was taken out of the book of Enoch. But first, let's go to Mark chapter 14. Jesus is standing in Caiaphas, the high priest's house. He's on trial. And Caiaphas asked the question, are you the Messiah? Jesus could say yes, but he doesn't. He says one sentence that causes everybody to lose their mind. You will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds. The high priest tore his robes. Why? Because that line's not small talk. Jesus just gave them Daniel chapter 7. Daniel looks up and he sees someone coming with the clouds of heaven. And this figure doesn't look like an angel. He doesn't look like a monster. Daniel says he looks like a son of man, a human being. But this figure walks straight up to the Ancient of Days and he receives authority over every nation on earth. And he's got Psalm 110 in the same breath. The Lord is at your right hand. He will shatter kings on the day of his wrath. 2 texts in one sentence. He's the cloud rider from Daniel and he's the King-Shatterer from Psalms. That's not something you say to a room full of men that are scared of a revolt unless you're trying to get yourself crucified. And it worked because they pinned the label on him, blasphemer. He didn't get called blasphemer because he said, I'm a regular guy. But it was because he said, I'm the judge in Daniel who rides on the clouds and one day you're going to be the one standing in my court. That's why the high priest tore his robe. That's why that title, not Messiah, not Christ, but Son of Man, is the one that got Jesus killed. But if we really want to see how seriously they took it, there's this text, one that most people have never been taught, and it shows us exactly what the high priest heard. 1 Enoch, chapters 37 through 71. It's called the Similitudes. This book's not in our Bible. It's not in most Bibles, but it was deeply important to Jewish readers during the time of Jesus. Enoch's story is one of the strangest stories in the Bible. His introduction, and Enoch walked with God and he was not, for God took him. That single line launched an entire library. Jewish writers love writing about Enoch. Visions, prophecies, trips to heaven, because if God took him, whatever he saw on the other side needs to be told. And what he saw changes everything about how we read the words Son of Man. In 1 Enoch 46, Enoch sees the throne room. He sees the head of days, white hair, judgment setting up. And standing with him is somebody else. Enoch calls him that Son of Man. And Enoch asks the question that we should all be asking, who is he? Where did he come from? And why is he standing next to the head of days? The angel answered, he's tied to righteousness. He reveals what's hidden. Then it gets even louder. Chapter 48, verses 2 and 3. Before the sun and the signs were created, before the stars of heaven were made, his name was named before the Lord of spirits. Did you catch that? He was before the sun and the stars. Before the world was made, this figure out-exists existence. He was already known, already chosen, already named in the presence of God. Verse 6 says, he was concealed in the presence of the Lord of spirits. Concealed, hidden in the presence of God since before time. Remember that word, concealed, because it's coming back. In chapter 62, every king on earth sees him, and they fall on their faces and beg for mercy, but they get none. Then, chapter 69, nations worship him. He sits on a throne of glory. He passes judgments on the kings of the earth. And in the Jewish scriptures, that's God's job. Only God can sit on the throne of glory. Only God can judge the nations. And in 1 Enoch, the Son of Man's doing all of it. That's what the high priest heard. Not I'm the Messiah. Messiah is a Jewish title, a national king, David's son on David's throne. Jesus is claiming something bigger. He's not just the Messiah. He's a figure who was named before creation, who was hidden in the very presence of God, and who judges not just Israel, every king, every ruler, every generation. He avoided Messiah because Messiah was too small, and he had been saying it for 3 years, 81 times, in public, to their faces, concealed until the moment of revelation. So if this text adds that much context, if it shows us exactly why the high priest tore his robes, why don't we know more about it? When the Dead Sea Scrolls were recovered in the caves of Qumran, every other section of 1 Enoch was there. 21 copies across 11 manuscripts. But the Similitudes, chapters 37 through 71, the exact section with the throne room vision was missing. Not a single fragment. Why? Well, in 1976, there was a scholar by the name of Joseph Millet, and he used that absence to claim that they were a forgery. They were just fan fiction written around 270 AD, centuries after Jesus. The Enochian scholars didn't agree with him. In 2005, at a monastery in Italy, 40 of their heavy hitters, they get together with one agenda to settle this question. And you know what? Not one scholar in the room supported Millet's late dating. Not one. And their argument was a good one. How would a text so obsessed with judgment not mention the fall of Jerusalem once? So the text is real. It's Jewish. It predates the Gospels. So why is it missing from the Dead Sea Scrolls? James H. Charlesworth had a great answer. It's not about timing. It's about theology. At the end of the Similitudes, chapters 70 and 71, an angel looks at Enoch and says, "You are the Son of Man, who was born to righteousness." Enoch himself gets identified as the Son of Man. Do you see the problem here? Enoch's no longer just a witness. Now he's the figure on the throne. And the Dead Sea community couldn't accept that. They expected two messiahs, a king from David's line and a priest from Levi's. But this messiah didn't fit either category. A patriarch from Genesis on the throne of God? No way. The Similitudes wasn't absent because they didn't exist. They were absent because the Qumran community rejected them. The title Son of Man, this enthroned, pre-existent, nation-judging figure was too much for even the Essenes. This is the most open, most apocalyptically minded community in all of Judaism. And they looked at this section and said, "Nah, that's a little much." Now imagine what that would do to a Sadducee, because that's who's in the room. Caiaphas was a Sadducee. The Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in angels. They didn't accept any text outside the Torah. And a man in chains just looked them in the eye and said, "I am the figure from Daniel who rides on the clouds. I am the one who sits on the throne, and you're going to see me there." Too dangerous for the Essenes, too dangerous for the Sadducees, too dangerous for Caiaphas' house. And yet spoken 81 times by a carpenter from Nazareth who looked the world in the eye and said, "That's me." Now, I'll be honest, I don't know what to do with chapter 70 and 71. The fact that Enoch isn't in the canon means it doesn't have to keep me up at night. And I know what Daniel saw. In Daniel chapter 7, Daniel sees a figure coming with the clouds. And we've been reading that scene one way for a long time. But what if the Son of Man isn't leaving? What if he's arriving? That's the next video. So if you're interested in more of this, hit that subscribe button. And if you've made it this far into the video about the Similitudes of Enoch, I built something for you. A free case file. Every Son of Man saying in the Gospels mapped out side by side with the first Enoch passages. The parallels, the dating timeline, the scholars who settled the debate, one page, keep it. The link's in the description. Grab it, and you're also going to get my weekly newsletter where we go deeper into these passages that may have been skipped or these books that may have got cut to see the story behind the story. Because that's what we do here. And I'll see you in the next one. God bless you.